Picture this. You are sitting in the cockpit of the toughest bomber ever built by human hands. You are 24 years old. You are flying your 17th combat mission, and you are invincible. But in the blink of an eye, the world in front of you simply vanishes. The dashboard, the windshield, the floor beneath your boots gone. In a fraction of a second, your pressurized cocoon is replaced by a gaping, jagged hole 3 meters wide. A 300-kilometer-per-hour hurricane screams into the fuselage, dropping the temperature instantly to 40 degrees below zero. You look at your co-pilot. He looks at you. The control columns in your hands are dead. The hydraulic lines are severed. The only thing connecting you to the wings and the tail are a handful of bare steel cables whipping violently in the freezing wind. And behind you there is nothing but 26,000 feet of empty sky. This is not a scene from a Hollywood blockbuster. This is the morning of July 14, 1944. This is the B-17 flying fortress nicknamed Mizpah. And for the next 10 agonizing minutes, 10 men are about to challenge the laws of physics in one of the most impossible survival stories in aviation history. To understand the sheer insanity of what happened that day, we have to go back to the briefing room. It is the summer of 1944. The air war over Europe has turned into a meat grinder. First Lieutenant Evald Swanson and his crew, part of the 483rd Bomb Group, flying out of Stare Par 1, Italy, are given a target that every pilot dreads: the oil refineries and railway yards of Budapest. The mission profile is simple on paper: fly into the heart of Nazi-occupied Hungary, drop to tons of high explosives to choke off the German fuel supply and get home. But everyone in the 15th Air Force knows the statistics. For every 10 men who climb into a B-17, 2 are not coming back. The Germans have fortified Budapest with over 288mm flak guns. These are not just cannons. They are precision instruments of death capable of hurling a shell the size of a car engine 5 miles into the air, where it detonates into a cloud of razor-sharp steel. At 9:42 in the morning, Swanson's B-17 settles into the bomb run. They are flying in the Purple Heart corner, the center of the formation, the most vulnerable spot with nowhere to dodge. The sky around them begins to blossom with black puffs of smoke. Shrapnel rains against the aluminum skin of the aircraft, like gravel thrown on a tin roof. Swanson holds the formation steady. He has to. That is the job, but at 9:44 in the morning, luck runs out. A single 88mm high-explosive shell finds its mark. It does not just graze the aircraft, it strikes dead center on the nose. The devastation is absolute. In a millisecond, the entire nose section of the B-17 is vaporized. Second Lieutenant Kenneth Dudley, the bombardier who had just released the bombs, and Second Lieutenant Joe Henderson, the navigator, are gone. They are erased from existence along with the Norden bomb site, the nose turret, and the front hull. The explosion does more than just kill 2 men, it radically alters the physics of the aircraft. With thousands of pounds of weight suddenly sheared off the front, the B-17 center of gravity shifts violently backward. The plane rears up like a wounded animal threatening to flip over onto its back. If it stalls now, it will enter an unrecoverable spin, pinning the crew to the walls with G-force until they slam into the earth. Swanson fights the yoke, but there is no resistance. The explosion has blown away the instrument panel. There is no artificial horizon, no altimeter, no airspeed indicator. He is flying blind, deaf and numb. To make matters worse, the shrapnel has shredded the number to engine on the right wing. It explodes in a spray of oil and metal, the propeller seizing instantly. The number 1 engine on the left wing catches fire. They are losing power, they are losing altitude, and the aircraft is trying to tear itself apart. This is the moment where training ends and survival instinct takes over. The control cables, normally threaded neatly through pulleys and hidden behind panels, are now exposed, dangling and thrashing in the open cavity where the nose used to be. The flight engineer, Frank G. R. EMS, eased the problem immediately. The cables are slack, the pilot inputs are not reaching the tail. Without a word, without a radio, the surviving crew makes a decision that defies logic. If the machine will not fly itself, they will fly it by hand literally. The radio operator, the waist gunners, the engineer, they rush forward into the freezing gale. They grab the bare, grease-covered steel cables with their hands. It is 40 degrees below zero. The cold burns like fire. The steel cables cut into their palms and gloves, but they hold on. It becomes a gruesome, desperate dance. When Swanson needs to bank lift, he signals wildly, and the men in the fuselage pull the corresponding cable with all their strength. When the nose pitches up too high, they heave on the elevator cables to force it down. They have become human servos, living components of a dying machine. Imagine the scene: a headless bomber, streaming smoke limping across the Hungarian sky, slow not by hydraulics or mechanics, but by the raw muscle power of terrified young men pulling on wires. They are losing altitude fast, dropping from 26,000 feet to 20 for then 22. The wind noise is deafening, drowning out the roar of the remaining engines. Every second feels like an hour. Swanson knows this cannot last. The aircraft is a flying brick. The drag from the missing nose is acting like a giant air brake. They are falling behind the formation, becoming a straggler prime meat for the Luftwaffe fighters prowling the area. Swanson has no map, he has no navigator, he only knows one direction: southwest towards the Adriatic, towards safety. But the B-17 is bleeding energy, the structural integrity is failing. The tail gun, isolated in the rear, can feel the fuselage twisting and flexing. The ship is going to break in half. It is a mathematical certainty. Swanson makes the call. He turns to his crew, signaling towards the escape hatch. It is time to bail out. One by one, they jump: the waist gunners, the ball turret gunner, the radio operator. They hurl themselves into the void over Yugoslavia, trusting their lives to silk parachutes, but the pilots stay. Swanson and his co-pilot, Paul Berndt, remain strapped in, wrestling the beast, buying time for their friends to get clear. They are riding a corpse and they know it. At 20,000 feet, the aircraft is barely controllable. Swanson looks at Berndt and nods. It is over. Berndt Buckles climbs through the debris and jumps. Now Evald Swanson is alone, one man in a 65,000-pound wreck. The silence of the empty ship is eerie, broken only by the screaming wind and the groaning metal. He holds the throttles for a few more seconds, steadying the plane to ensure the others do not get hit by the debris. Then he releases the controls. The B-17 immediately rolls over and begins its final dive. Swanson fights the G-forces, dragging himself out of the pilot seat. He moves towards the open wound of the fuselage. He stands at the edge of the precipice, looking down at the patchwork fields of Europe for miles below. He jumps. The slipstream hits him like a sledgehammer. He pulls the ripcord. The chute opens with a violent cracks, napping him upright, but the landing is brutal. He drifts into a forest, a derriere crashing through the tree canopy at 15 miles per hour. A thick branch smashes into his leg, snapping the bone cleanly between the knee and ankle. He is left hanging in his harness, 15 feet above the ground, helpless in agony, with blood running down his flight suit. German soldiers arrive minutes later. They cut him down. But there is no gentleness here. This is enemy territory. Swanson is treated with basic morphine and a splint, then thrown into the back of a truck. He is now a prisoner of war. For the next 9 months, Swanson and his surviving crew members endure the bleak existence of Stalag Luft 4. They survive hunger, disease, and the bitter cold of the Black March across Germany as the Third Reich collapses. But they survive when the war ended, when they were finally liberated and sent home. Evald Swanson did not talk much about that day. He married, raised a family, and lived a quiet life in Michigan. He did not consider himself a hero. He just said they were lucky, but luck does not explain flying a headless bomber for 10 minutes. Luck does not explain holding a disintegrating plane steady while your friends jump. That was not luck. That was the indomitable will of a generation that faced the apocalypse and refused to blink. The B-17 Mizpah is long gone, a pile of scrap metal buried somewhere in the Balkans. But the story of the crew who flew her by hand remains one of the most harrowing testaments to human courage in the history of aerial warfare. They literally held it together until the very end. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history, est deadliest miscalculation, smash that like button and subscribe. I am your strategy observer. I will see you on the next battlefield.